Deputy McCall, if you take a 5 or 10 minutes. 10, and then Deputy Marlene O'Connor is taking the other 10 later. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank each of the organisations for being with us here today. I think there are very few people in this House that needed a pandemic to outline to them the importance of sport on our society, on mental health, and on the many other aspects. But I have to acknowledge, and I think it would be wrong for us not to do it formally, the huge level of contribution which sport, and particularly the structure of sport, played during the early stages of this pandemic. It was often the organised ability of local sports clubs to respond, whether it was for older people in their homes or a structured way for people to engage online. I think it was crucially important, and I want to acknowledge that here. I think you're right in terms of the return to activity, the joy on some of the kids' faces I saw in my own area. I know there were many people returning to games around the country, and while we may not be able to do that in Dublin, even the fact of my own club, Ballymunkickum's, being in the club final, we will be trying to support that club with our red and green flags, as they did with Bohemians in Fisborough with the red and black. So there's no doubt the benefits, the psychological benefit which sport plays. And while sport isn't a business, it does have a financial model. And so can I just focus a little bit on that for the moment to assist you in making the point that each of you have made. The IRFU have been clear in the figure that they've given of 30 million. Perhaps the GAA and the FAI might outline what they believe the financial loss might be, and I apologise if I've missed it in the submission.
As of today, Deputy, our losses for this year stand at €21 million. We're about, hopefully, to embark upon playing senior inter-county championships over the course of the next 2-3 months. The amount at risk for us as that championship plays out is potentially up to another €20 million. And added on top of that, and I'm talking here just purely as a governing body, on top of that, the projections for the 32 counties around Ireland and the 4 provincial councils is a further 11 million of losses this year. So in totality for the organisation, excluding clubs, I'm talking about €32 million lost and the prospect of a further 20 million at risk as we embark upon the championship. So it's stark, Deputy.
For us, Deputy, it's 19 million. So effectively, for the FAI itself, the association, it's 14, and then another 5 million for the clubs, who were all affected by it. It's in the documentation we would have sent, which accompanied the pack that we gave everyone.
Certainly stark figures, and I imagine if you include then the risk at local level, those figures are compounded. And I know I've dealt locally with one soccer club, Talca Rovers, who have, I would say, are at the point of closing their gates and are dealing with banks. Some clubs will have an event facility or a pub on the site, some won't. How have each of your organisations assisted those local clubs, perhaps with non-financial support, advice, assistance with negotiating with banks and so on?
In that regard, we would have liaised with our treasurers in the county boards, and they in turn would have worked with our actual clubs. And in recent times, we have actually engaged with financial institutions with regard to getting funding to release to our actual clubs, and it's our intention in the next number of weeks to actually release funding down through the system to our provincial councils, county boards and club structure to actually keep all those entities within the organisation viable.
If I might add here, in the course of a normal financial year, we would expect to divert between 12 to 15 million euros of cash directly to counties and to clubs, and that's what we had planned to do at the outset of this year. In fact, that figure will turn out to be hopefully 4 million euros, so a substantial reduction. And I think Philip mentioned earlier on the prospect of borrowings looming for the IRFU. In fact, that 4 million will be funded at least in part and possibly substantially by a borrowing programme that we've already undertaken. We started that work last week.
In relation to rugby, the first thing we did when we saw the onset of the crisis was we put together a club sustainability fund of about 500,000 and effectively tried to assist clubs who are facing some significant financial challenges. We also put in place or distributed a COVID starter pack in terms of how to open up, materials to help clubs open up their grounds in relation to once the game started opening up again. That was worth probably another 100,000 in terms of equipment. Since then, we've been running a series of webinars very successfully with our clubs in terms of how to deal with the financial situation, how to raise funds themselves, and using the ideas from different clubs contributing at those webinars, sharing experiences. I think that has been really helpful and really successful. We also have a club fundraising program which clubs sell effectively. We put up the prizes for effectively a lottery type scenario, and which generates significant funding year on year, and that has been put in place again this year. So we're doing the best that we can. We're trying to educate, we're trying to facilitate, we're trying to assist wherever we can, and the clubs have been very receptive to that.
Pretty similar. We would have reached out to the clubs to really try and understand the financial implications of COVID-19. We would have supported clubs financially, very like the guys. We've been trying to brainstorm with them, pilot online lotteries, national draws, trying to generate other ways of generating income in the current climate. We have got a submission from all the clubs that decided to respond to it, and we would have included that in our submission in terms of looking for support.
I think the initial